Welcome, guys, to a very special show here on the O'Shea Duke Jackson channel. I am your host, O'Shea Duke Jackson, and today we have a very, 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 very special guest. I've been trying to link up with this particular YouTuber for about the last month or about the last few weeks, and I was traveling. And then on the days that here, it's typically available on Sundays, and obviously I have the Sunday Rumble on those days. But before I introduce him, I was strolling on YouTube as usual, and YouTube recommended me a very interesting video. And I said, well, because I am, like I said, conservative, you guys know. And then it was called White Privilege from an Asian Perspective, and I was like, well, what the fuck is this about? And it was from this particular YouTuber, and it was a really, 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 really strong video with some particular strong points of consideration. So I would say, well, fuck it, let me bring him on and see if we could talk about the same thing from his perspective. And he's a supportive guy. He's always commenting in the live chat. He's always getting along with people, and he's blowing up, guys. So I might not be able to get him again like next month because he's growing like 20,000 subs in 1 month. So I want to introduce to some, present to others, the Zach Hing YouTube channel. I want you guys to go and support his channel. He's a very good YouTuber. He's up and coming. He's only been on the platform for how long?
A little over 6 weeks. I mean, the channel's been alive for a year, but seriously, about 6 weeks.
6 weeks and almost 30,000 subs in 6 weeks. My vlogcast channel doesn't have 28,000 subs. I've been over there for like 2 years. So we want to welcome Zach King to the channel. What's going on, brother Zach?
Doing well. Thank you, O'Shea, for having me on your show. Big fan. Been following you for a minute now. At least definitely have been checking out your content for the past few weeks. And yeah, I really like the guests that you bring on. People from all different backgrounds, different countries. And most importantly, people who have different values and beliefs. And I like that you actually inspire a dialogue, which is something that I'm totally all for, and actually something I want to do also myself in the near future.
Okay, no, thank you so much. Before we kind of get into the topic, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where you come from, your ethnicity, if you will, and things like that, because that will help us understand your position.
Yeah, definitely. Just a little bit of background info on me. I currently, right now, live in the San Francisco Bay in Oakland. I've said that in a couple of videos already. I am originally from, that's always like a long answer I have to give people because I was born in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So I'm a third culture kid. I lived there for about 10 years, lived in the States for a little while in my middle school years. I talked about this as well. And then I actually moved, before I was in California, I moved here from Shanghai, China. So I actually lived there for the past 6 years before I came here for college. And, again, third culture kid. I've been fortunate to be able to experience, Western culture and Eastern culture and basically formulate some of my own views and perspectives. I think the one thing that I'm blessed with is the perspective of knowing what it's like to live in other countries and look at America from the outside in, and also living in the States, being an American citizen. My family's been in the US for a while, so I'm not like what you would call a second generation Chinese American. I'm fourth generation. I know some people don't really like that term, but it kind of gives you a little bit of perspective as to like some of the beliefs that my family holds, that I've been taught. I'm a Chinese I come from a Chinese family that's been here over 100 years, which is longer than most Chinese families. And we weren't brought up in the Chinatowns per se. So there's also a bit of story and context behind that. But like, that's essentially it. I think of myself as an American citizen and constitutionally conservative. Fiscally conservative, you could say, but I also have a little bit of social beliefs that may also lean otherwise. And I mean, that's the important thing was after learning a little bit about different things, when I went to college, it was more progressive and liberal. There was nothing really inherently wrong with that other than the fact that I realized that it was not very easy to have different kinds of discussions, things that were more perhaps abrasive or not in line with the political agenda. So that's where I'm at now. I made some of these videos because not only is it a time of political unrest in today's society, especially in Western culture, because it's not just happening in the US, it's happening in Australia, Canada, and in Western Europe as well. I walked away. I made a video about that, and I decided to become more public with my views because I wanted to have these conversations with people. I wasn't able to do that, in my area, at least not as often. I mean, now it's happening more so, but yeah. I hope that answers your question, but that's where I'm at currently.
Okay. And shout out, I'm also, as you found out before the show, from California too. So we're both natives of that state, in some form. Let me kind of get to your YouTube channel again. I don't know how you're able to do it. Almost 29,000 subscribers in 6 weeks. But the most successful video, and probably one of the best videos that I've seen this year.
Oh, thank
you. Yeah. And I thought my videos are good, but I mean, one of the really good videos that was kind of, I thought, well thought out, has some real strong positions. Although, as African American, I kind of see things a little different. But you made a video that says white privilege from an Asian perspective, and on the thumbnail, wake up, people, it doesn't exist. Now, a lot of times when people, let's say like say Brandon Tatum or Anthony Brian Logan, when they say that white privilege doesn't exist, people get real shook. But very rarely do we think of what an Asian or a Chinese American thinks about white privilege. When you hear about white privilege, and why do you think that it doesn't exist?
Well, in my opinion, it's because when we think of white privilege in the context of what I was talking about from a socioeconomic standpoint, which I did reference in the video, it would imply that whites solely have all the privilege. It's a blanket term for thinking that because you are white, because you are the beneficiary of a lot of this so-called privilege because of your race, that people who are not white will be exempt from that. So when I look at it as a rule, which is what a lot of people who believe in it push, is that, because you're white, you're automatically going to be more advantaged. You're automatically going to be more successful. You're just going to be lent a better hand. I don't think that that's necessarily true when you have people who are not white and refute that law. Now, that being said, I'm not saying that racial bias and discrimination doesn't happen. All I am saying is that there are instances in which, with hard work and with understanding what your culture and your choices are like, that you can get ahead despite white privilege. But to also say that it exists means that, every white person has that, when that's obviously not the case. There are some that are born in very poor, economically disadvantaged neighborhoods and may face a lot of the same issues that people in other minority groups may face. That's simply what I was bringing my attention to. And, one of the biggest things that I talked about in the video was Asians. Asians do not fall under that blanket of white privilege. And if they do, I have yet to see somebody really publicly acknowledge that. I get that we get grouped in there because of the class system, because we may be more fair-skinned. But like, white privilege as a concept, I mean, how can you have that when you have Asian Americans that are doing well because of choices, Chinese people of Chinese descent. And on top of that, you have people of another demographic, like Nigerian Americans, who don't seem to have that problem. They're highly educated and they do well. A lot of people have also said that I'm white, and I'm not. I am full 100% Chinese. Now, if I give off the impression that I look that way, I can't really help my genes. I can't help that, but that's my perspective on it. By no means am I saying that this is something that is thorough and it's like in a vacuum. I'm just encouraging people to have a discussion about this, just as a lot of other people do, like Brandon or Larry Elder, Thomas Sowell, and unfortunately there aren't a lot of people that look like me that are talking about it right now, which is why I decided to talk about it a little bit more. Now, whether I'm an authority on it or whatsoever, I've already put my views out there, and it's just for people to think about.
Let me ask you this. You said that Asians don't qualify under white privilege. Can you explain why they don't?
Well, one example is typically in the barrier to entry when it comes to education, right? So white privilege. I mean, when we talk about, like, say, standardized testing, for example, with SAT scores, the fact that an Asian person has to score 200 points above a white person even for the same slot in the same college, assuming they're granted the same opportunities, is not white privilege. As a matter of fact, it's more difficult for you to do it, and yet, you are occupying a large percentage of the college population. And this is not just in like public universities across the US. It's definitely something that was brought to light, especially with that whole Harvard Institute with the Asian students. The fact that you have to outperform, you have to do better, you have to do better, you have to score perfect scores just to be able to compete with somebody who has that. So that's what I'm saying, is that how is that, equivalent when it comes to white privilege, when you have to work extra hard and still have to get into that slot? How are we the beneficiaries of that when it's not really egalitarian? That's one example. And that's usually the example that I'm most fluent in, simply because it affects people of my age group the most, and it's something that I've looked into the most. Now, I know that there are other instances as well, but that's the one I commonly draw to, simply because education, we typically think of it as being the first step in what will determine overall affluence in America. At least that's what some people would believe, is like, okay, it starts with education. You don't have education, how are you going to go and get a good job? How are you going to go and cultivate your skills and become successful? So I hope that answers your question.
Let me ask you this. Why do you think, for example, when you mentioned Nigerian Americans, why are Nigerian Americans doing so much better than African Americans, in your opinion?
Honestly, that's something that I'll have to look into further, but it's been pointed out that they seem to be exempt for that. I think that could come down to a variety of different reasons. A lot of people may indicate choice as being one of those things, or culture, perhaps placing a greater emphasis on education. But actually, O'Shea, if you can enlighten me further on that, that's something that I feel like I need to learn more about, because I am not an authority on that. I have just witnessed, not just from what people have told me, but also from what I've looked into, that just happens to be the case. It could be culture, it could be choices, but I mean, assuming that that is the case, because that seems to be the biggest problem that people are faced with the element of choice, that's what I would go with. I think that they just make different choices, and they value aspects of culture, like education, probably more so than other things, which is why that happens to be the case. As far as affluence goes, as far as being a high income earner, yeah, that's what I think.
Let me do this. 217 people watching right now. Guys, this is the Zag Hing YouTube channel. It was nice enough to come over and talk to us. I know there are some people that are getting triggered in the live chat. But again, this is white privilege from his perspective, not from a black perspective, but from his perspective. So do me a favor, get the likes up on the video. And guys, go into the thank you, Big James Rento James. Let's go ahead and get the likes up on the video. And no, there is nobody being allowed on the panel. Stop asking me, Negro. No, there's not. Sit your ass down. Get the likes up on the video. Let me do this real quick. In comparisons to those Chinese Americans who are doing very well, 200 points above, let's say, African Americans, Black Americans. Talk about those things.
Yeah.
What circumstances did Chinese Americans face? What has put Chinese Americans in such a situation that they are scoring 200 points above, let's say, whites or blacks? What is different between Chinese Americans and most minorities, Latinos, blacks, in your opinion?
I would like to think that there is no underlying difference as far as competence is concerned. I really would like to think that that would be the cases in which we are being evaluated. As far as how the history of that came to be the case, with the fact that they had a higher barrier to entry, I mean, that may have to do with stereotypes that have been pushed forward for a variety of time. Now, again, I have no direct evidence to support that, but that simply is the way it is. All I can talk about is from my experiences, not only growing up in a Chinese family, but Chinese culture and overseas as well, is that the emphasis on that. It was, more of a lifestyle of study hard, get a good job, and go to work. And that is almost like, you could say that is what's created that advantage as far as doing well and everything. But the irony of that is that a lot of Asians actually see that as a curse. It's like, I have to work so hard to get by, because if I don't go to school and I don't get a good job, I'm disowned by my family and I will not be successful. It almost seems to be the singular driving force that I think is specific to Chinese culture. I'm not going to speak for all Asians here. I can only speak for Chinese people. That being the case, I can't really speak for what the values are being valued in other minority groups. I just know that there is just an emphasis that is placed on education that just happens to be the case. As far as how the barrier of entry became higher, maybe it just became, commonplace to see a lot more Asians, entering into colleges, and I guess you could say inflating it a little bit because of that emphasis to why the barrier of entry may be higher. And like I said, that's just my theory. I don't think that that's the case. That's something that I have to look into further as to why that became part of how Asians are being evaluated when they go into schools.
Let me ask you this, because a lot of African Americans, and when you watch the restream of this, you'll see the chat going crazy. We have 265 people watching right now in the first 15 minutes, and we haven't even scheduled it or pre-scheduled it. So this is a hot show. When Black people talk about white privilege exists, because I'm pretty sure you got some comments on your video from those people who are from the African American community. And what kind of questions, I'm wondering, did you receive, or comments did you receive from those people? And I'm pretty sure some of them were pejorative. What questions were you receiving from Blacks on that video?
I mean, it was just, I got a variety of different responses. A lot of them, simply said, well, I'm Black, I'm African American, and I agree. Or the whole Nigerian American aspect, that part of the equation was actually brought to my attention more so in the comment section. Now, I know that was something that I looked at prior to making the video, but it wasn't something that I decided to include simply because I'm not here to talk about Nigerian Americans. I'm talking about how it pertains to Asians and my experiences with it. But to answer your question, some of the questions, I don't think there were specifics as to like, well, prove it or anything. It was just mostly like, well, how can you talk about this? It doesn't really affect you. It doesn't really impact you. When in reality, I mean, you could argue that it does. It does impact us, especially when it comes to the barrier to entry. So some of the questions I got were like, okay, well, how can that exist? Because we're not doing very well. It's like we are the reason why we are not successful is because of white people, and that was probably the main blanket term. And this was something that I talked about further with other people. And it's the all-encompassing term. It's like, yeah, it exists simply because Black people don't seem to be doing as well as white people. That was just the main thing that was being pushed forward. Some people agreed with me and some people didn't. But did you want to ask me a question about that, or did you have?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, in your opinions, let's say for the Nigerian Americans and the African Americans. I mean, from the outside looking in, not that you're a specialist and you say that you're not. I definitely appreciate your honesty. Yeah. Why do you think that the Nigerian American? I mean, do you think that what's different? You said the Nigerian Americans, they study hard and they have a better culture. Are there anything else that makes those two groups different outside of that, in your opinion?
In my opinion, for right now, from what I can deduce and think about, no. As opposed to the value, the emphasis that's being placed on education, the element of choice, of really saying that, okay, this is what's important to me and this is what I want to pursue. That's what I would like to think at the end of the day is the only real differences. And that was the big point of my video, was that it just comes down to choice. That's what I wanted to talk about, and that's what I pushed forward. Like I said, I haven't seen the history of Nigerian Americans and how that has played a role in their overall success to be able to speak further on that. But like I said, I mean, I think the one thing that I can speak from, especially from the perspective of a Chinese guy, is that is the emphasis that's put onto us. Those are the choices that are instilled very, very early on. It's almost like you could say it's a part of your values, very, very thorough from the get-go, discipline and all of that, choosing, making sure you go to a good school, that it tends to just like refute the aspect of white privilege when you do well. When you don't fit that, you're not white, yet you still do well. So how can it, how does that work? That's where I'm coming from that.
Well, let's look at the experiences though. When you look at the African Americans' history in this country, is it the same as the Nigerian Americans' experience?
Depends on when you could say it depends on when they came to America, right?
So when do you think that like Nigerian Americans started coming to America?
Probably in just the last 100 years, I would say.
Probably
it's not something that I know a lot about, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not completely versed on.
Okay. No, I mean, because we're trying to get some clarity. Just to not to say that, and you mentioned that the ability you don't think there is different. So the ability is the same. That the capability to achieve is the same in all races, and I got to give you credit for that. But
Mm-hmm.
I guess to the point to get an understanding, in this point, African Americans have been under certain situations in this country for over 400 years.
Right.
So having things taken from them, being a part of the Jim Crow system, there's no other group has had the same experience as African Americans in America. Would you at least agree to that?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we kind of compare this group, the Nigerian population that may come over more educated, they come over with their own customs, their own culture. African Americans have had a lot of those things taken away from them. Then wouldn't it make sense that this group could outperform Black Americans who are here saying that white privilege exists because they've been, under certain situations that no other group has faced? Then
Mm-hmm.
it will make sense why a Chinese person that has their own culture and their own language and tag, and the Nigerians or anybody that comes over, it would make sense that while they're doing good, because they don't necessarily feel it like
Yeah.
Black Americans feel it, right?
But that's exactly what you're saying, and I think that we're actually in agreement there. The key word you used was culture, right? At no point was it actually something that was pertaining to race, which is usually what the whole conversation of white privilege is around, is that it's about race. You're disadvantaged because of race. Yet, is race, I mean, culture and race, yeah, they're related, but like we talked about culture, the culture that you bring with you, the culture that you're brought up in, is what is overall going to be the biggest determining factor of your life, your choices. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that, yeah, you're right. I mean, there are communities that have been here longer that have become more disadvantaged, and you could say that it's impacted their culture. But at the end of the day, is it really about race, or is it about culture and choice? I mean, that's the discussion that usually I tend to have, is that, like, you're right. I mean, but you would say that Nigerian Americans fall under, they're Black, that's their race, that's their community. And unfortunately, because of identity politics, they all get grouped. And that's also another thing that I want to talk about, in that my experiences as a Chinese American is going to be different from somebody who's Korean, from somebody who's Japanese, from somebody who's Thai. And I would agree that, there may be inherent prejudices and bias, or other genetic differences that may compound you, that will have everything to do with how you decide to navigate the world as far as your choices go, that may not necessarily be tied to race. And that's what I'm trying to bring to light with my discussion with white privilege, and that it's not an all-encompassing thing. There's more to it. So how can it also exist if it's solely based on race, when other people are exemptions to that? Other people have been able to do it in spite of that. Yeah, I hope that helps. Something that I'm still thinking about and still investigating further.
Let me ask you this: Did Chinese people ever benefit from like civil rights or affirmative action?
Arguably, yeah. I mean, like, affirmative action in what sense? Like, to fulfill a diversity survey, like when you get a job, that kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, in my opinion, when I think of affirmative action, especially when it pertains to education, I think no. I think no, we're not a beneficiary of that, because the barrier to entry is higher. The idea here is to encourage people who are disadvantaged, or may not necessarily be granted the same opportunities, to be able to have those opportunities due to that. But I don't think affirmative action in that sense has helped. It hasn't helped Asians, and I've talked about this prior in other videos as well. And we've seen it not only historically, but we've seen it recently. You have all the qualifications you need, and you're held to a higher standard, but even in that, you still may not necessarily get the slot. You may not get the role.
Well, what I want to know is this, because what I do know is when Nigerians or when other groups try to come to the United States,
Mm-hmm.
Usually the USA really only accepts, from what I understand, as far as people who come in with green, like visas and stuff that stay here. These people are typically talented. So the Chinese people who are coming to the United States, are these the worst of the Chinese people that come here? Or, I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? Is the United States benefiting from top-notch Chinese people who come here? Are they already educated? What is their status in China when they come to America? I mean, can you trace your family back when they first came, and what were they? What was your family initially that you know when they were in China? What were they doing?
I mean, as far as I can tell, and I don't have a lot of concrete evidence for this, I just have it from family accounts. I mean, we moved, escaping the communist regime 100 years ago, and from what I could tell, we came from like a small town, a small village in Guangdong province. That's where it's from. That's where I'm historically from. As far as the jobs that we held, I mean, I don't think, and I have to check on this because I don't. My great grandfather isn't someone that I have a lot of information on. I never knew him. I only heard snippets from my family members. I don't think he was educated. I don't think that he went to college or anything. I know that he came to America through Angel Island, went through the process, and came here with the intention to work, the intention to start businesses and work. You know, he didn't. I don't think I haven't heard stories of him coming here educated or coming here just like with skills or anything. It's like he kind of had to work his way up and learn. And I find that some other families that are of a similar generation also share a similar anecdote. They have similar accounts of that, where it's just like, well, we were just running away because, you know, life in America was better than life in China. With the communist regime going on and people, becoming being enslaved for their beliefs and perhaps even persecuted, it was a lot more attractive to be able to come to America. But I don't think that he came to America with education, with skills, or came and worked his way up. That's my experiences.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me get somebody. Hey, get that segment motherfucker out of here. Hold on. I'm sorry, Zach. For your people to listen.
I mean, I understand.
You motherfuckers in the chat, stop bitching. If you don't want to watch the fucking show, then get your musty ass out. As the motherfuckers who are complaining about the show, you never donate, you never give any goddamn money or support or nothing. So shut your motherfucking ass up. This is my goddamn channel. I'll have who the fuck I want to have on here whenever the fuck I get ready. And if you don't own this motherfucking channel, I'll run this shit. So shut your motherfucking ass up and get your dusty ass. Get them out of here. I'm sorry, dog.
No, you're fine. This is your show, and I appreciate us having a productive dialogue about this. Again, like I said, it's not necessarily going to be what everybody will agree with or talk about, but we are talking about it, you and me. This is the point. This is great, and I don't claim to have the answers for every single account for people of different demographics or anything. But the fact that we're talking about this is the whole point in having videos like this and talking about them further. As time goes by, as history develops, we're going to notice that things change. And that's also something to think about as well. My accounts, like I said, just to kind of tie it back to your initial question about my family, my accounts from my generation from 100 years ago, the experiences are going to be different from somebody who came just 50 years ago. Maybe they arrived and they had more education, and maybe their element of choice might have been different. All I'm saying is that race is not the only factor. It may be a role, but to consider the fact that race is the only thing that you're being evaluated for as it pertains to how the course of your life plays out is, I don't think that there's any basis for that. I don't think that it can solely be traced to race. So that's my ideas and my experiences, and I hope that helps. I kind of sometimes go on a segue, but
no, it's good. Let me kind of jump in here real quick from my perspective, because when I was watching your video as an African American conservative like you, you make some strong points that I think that nobody can get around. I think definitely. As an African American, I can see in my society that some people in our culture that we have adopted doesn't push certain things that other cultures do. But at the same time, you've already admitted that African Americans have been under certain things, disadvantages that no other group has faced.
Black or African Americans, because they're
African Americans, because the reason why I will not include Nigerians or other Africans is because when Black people were fighting for civil rights, it's because of African Americans fight for civil rights that the Nigerian Americans, who are a different group, although we have common ancestors, obviously, but as a group, they were able to benefit from the struggles and hardships of African Americans. Let's talk about affirmative action. The affirmative action pieces that Nigerian Americans got to kind of, when they brought their culture, they got the same affirmative action that African Americans got, which they should not have received. And we opened the door for a lot of Blacks, which actually catapulted them in many cases over us. When you look at white privilege, we could agree that up until 1968, where
Yeah,
Jim Crow laws kind of ended or whatever, yeah, blacks, you had, we couldn't do certain things. But
right.
here's the situation. African Americans, that whole kind of, um, African Americans have been targeted in a lot of ways to fail.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
masses will fail. I mean, I think that's proof of that we've seen in this country. And when it comes to us, when we look at white privilege, we look at, okay, we've been pushed out of the market for so long. When an
Right.
Asian person comes in and looks at the black community or some other communities, like, whoa, I cannot believe you've been here for this long and you guys can't do this. Like, we just got here like 20 minutes ago and we're already doing very well. To the Nigerian, they say, Nigerians come over here like 5 minutes, and then it's like, you guys have been here for 400 years. I think that depending on what circumstances that you face, because Asians will say, well, hey, we're performing very well, because
Hmm.
if the Asians experienced that, if the Chinese community had the same experience as the black community,
Right.
the Chinese community would not say white privilege don't exist. Like, if your family
Hmm.
experienced what my family did within 100 years, let's just say this,
Yeah.
60 years ago, my mother in Louisiana couldn't go to certain places.
Right.
My grandfather was a tenant farmer. His grandfather was a tenant farmer. They couldn't do certain things. They didn't know their ancestral land or things they came from. Plus, they were pushed out. So, if
Mhm.
you had our experience, would you then say white privilege doesn't exist?
I mean, that would depend on a myriad of different factors because you could say that Asians also were disadvantaged, especially, I'm not talking about the newer ones that came after affirmative action, but my family has been here before affirmative action. There was an Asian Exclusion Act. There was the fact that we were being put into Chinatowns that isolated us from the rest of people. You could only work in your Chinatowns. You could only thrive in your Chinatowns. You could only start businesses in there. It was a form of racial segregation. Now, I am not going to say that Asians have the same sob story as the black community. Not at all. I know that. But you could say that there were instances in which we were being held back. You could say that they were like, okay, we're only going to put you in here. You can only work in a Chinatown. And you know what? This is it. You live here, you thrive here, and you only associate with people of your kind. There was a whole aspect of American history in the 20s where there was the Chinese Exclusion Act. And there were barriers to entry when it came to jobs. There was propaganda that went around during World War II when we were fighting the Japanese. Now, of course, can people really tell the difference? The fact that, both Chinese people and Japanese people were put into concentration camps during that time. I mean, there are parts of our history as it pertains to a generational thing with Chinese Americans where I could say may mirror your experiences as well. Am I saying that they are on the same level? No, not at all. But I would say that that's something that I would think about when it comes to white privilege, and that, you know, I don't think so. I wouldn't like to think so. It didn't seem, I mean, it affected discrimination, you could arguably say affected my family during the time when there was no affirmative action, when we were actually being, discriminated against. And yet, this is where we are. We are here where we are. So, to answer your question, no. But I think it would be circumstantial because now there's going to be more of an implicit sense of like, what choices did I make? What choices did I have at the time that was not afforded to somebody else, and yet here I am. That's what I'm saying, and I think that honestly, it's not necessarily like something that is a. I don't think it comes down to race at the end of the day. Is what I'm saying.
Let me give you a perspective here. Let's say in the Chinese community, um in let's say for just let's say black people for whatever reason
Hmm.
had enslaved a few Chinese people, and black people had the power structure. This is hypothetically speaking, and
Yeah.
black people started to impregnate the Chinese women,
Hmm.
and then you have the regular Chinese women, and then you would have the black Ghanese women or people. Yeah, and it would be, but you would put them in your group,
Hmm.
but we would give privilege to those black Ghanese over the Chinese group. So meaning that in the Chinese community, it seems like those communities were just homogeneous,
Hmm.
and everybody still shared the same language, and many people disagreed to agreed. But assuming that this happened over a few years,
Right.
and you had these darker Chinese who had more privilege than the regular Chinese. Just
Mhm.
situations like that. And that animosity was planted in your community from, I mean, these are the things that happen to black people. I'm just saying so you can understand
Sure, sure.
as a person some of the things that black people experienced for many years and still do today that Chinese people have never experienced. I mean, to destroy certain communities of people working together. One thing that no one will disagree, Chinese people work together very, very well. I mean,
Mhm.
I even seen them in Kenya. I mean, I seen them in Uganda when I was there. But I'm just giving you an example of one of many tricks that
Mhm.
was placed in the community when white people were sleeping with black women and recreating babies, and then they would handpick these people are better than these other people.
Right.
Like even Thomas Sowell, and I'm pretty sure you're aware of that,
Yeah.
where whites turned intelligent blacks against blacks who were not that smart. I mean, like little things like this helps
Mhm.
destroy communities. Can
Right.
you talk about any experiences that maybe that might have happened in Chinese communities and Chinese people overcame it?
I mean, I think that there's a concept that exists with I'm not sure if it's just specific to interracial marriage, but arguably possibly so. But at the same time, I mean, you'd have to give me another example. Is this in the context of like education? Or are we talking about like just destroying communities as far as what I'm understanding you're saying?
Yeah, this is
Like
also another form of white privilege where you take half breed white and black people or half or mixed, and
mhm.
then you tell them that for us when we look at white privilege, you go to a church, you see white Jesus for black people. I don't know about how it works in Chinese, but then the closer you are to white, which I mean, you even see that in the Philippines, you see that in India, people doing stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
this is what was taught to African Americans. These people are your leaders because they're more closer to us, and these people are better than you. In the slavery field, they would get called the person that was light skinned or mulatto. He would be the house Negro, and the
Right.
darker you were the field. So it bred contempt. So what I'm saying is, when you look at the dysfunction of certain communities, and we kind of compare it against other communities, it's the warfare that was against blacks definitely doesn't match any other community.
Mhm.
Maybe some things are similar, but many things are not.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. It's hard to put a one finger on it and say that because whites did this to Black Americans, and as a result, you had varying degrees of privilege among people. That is just solely tied to that. Now, I'm not going to deny that like discrimination and racism did not happen. I mean, I do believe that it is true. I'm talking about it also in the context of today when you put other races in the perspective of that, and
Yeah.
that it's like, can we really say that it is solely because of race that people are at a disadvantage? And taking into account history, taking into account positions that you might have been, economically disadvantaged or racially disadvantaged, is it solely because of race?
Okay.
Because if it's not, and it has to do with culture, then that is different. That is more to do with it. Like I said, I'm not denying the fact that discrimination doesn't happen. But
Mm-hmm.
to solely think that race is the primary instigator, regardless of history, regardless of legislation like affirmative action that has come into place or anything else, which you did mention, I mean, we have to think about that for a second, right?
Yeah.
Are we gonna make that the culprit?
No, let's just deal with your culture points. I think they're strong enough. Um, what cultures? Well, let's talk about this. If I'm African, I'll deal with your culture thing. I won't deal with race.
Mhm.
You know, can you speak Chinese by any chance?
Yeah,
Say,
man.
say, say, because somebody wants to know, um, if you can speak Chinese. So if you could tell somebody something who speaks Chinese there, they ask you, just say something to them in Chinese so that they know that you can speak Chinese. They sometimes people think you can't speak Chinese. So for whatever reason,
What do you want me to say?
anything, say something to them like, hey, hello, how are you? Why do you think I can't speak Chinese? Something like that, I guess.
All right, just to humor everybody, then I'll do it. 你好，大家，我现在跟 O'Shea 讲话. There, that make you happy?
That's good. So
Yeah.
we talk about culture. and how it deals with privilege, white privilege. I think you make an excellent point. I would love to be able to do that. Do you know there's 44 million African Americans that would love to be able to do that?
Yeah.
But we can't.
Why
we
not?
don't know where we came from. We don't know anything about our culture. We don't know anything about it. In fact, that culture was stolen from us. Because when we were trying to keep our culture intact, we were killed for that. When we were trying to speak our languages, it was taken from us. It was spread out amongst Gambia, Senegal, Nigeria, Togo, president countries. They wouldn't even let us learn that. So that was stripped from us. We have no idea how to adjust to our culture in America. We're like lost kids here. Right. And I think that I mean, and this is an educational thing because as you're teaching me, I'm learning from you.
We're learning from each other. Yeah.
We can't speak our number one. Where is our home tongue? Where is it at? and when you don't have that, if it's just about culture, when a group someone takes your culture from you, then that culture is based off of that privilege. My name, which is your last name is Hing. My last name is Jackson, which is not a African last name. My culture was stolen from me. A lot of these people in the chat, cultures were stolen from them. So as a result of our culture being stolen from us, if we're not doing well and our culture is successful, then white privilege took it from us.
So what is your culture?
We don't know. How can you know? That's the thing. I'm glad you asked that question. Because if you go, when I go back to Africa and I see people speaking Luganda, I see people speaking Zulu or Xhosa when I'm in South Africa. These people know where they're from, they know their culture, they know their things, they know their whatever. We don't even have the opportunity to know that. So when you talk about cultures and stuff like that, if a group takes your culture because they don't want you to be yourself, then the future generations suffer because of that. As a result of no, you're going to have a white name, you're going to speak English, you're going to worship white Jesus, you're going to. So these are the things that. So that's what I'm saying. What do you say to a group that takes your culture from you? What do you do?
I mean, the thing is, it would imply that like. So say if we want to talk about culture, like where you're from, that you wouldn't be able to, at any means, even today, be able to trace your culture at all, as far as your home country goes. Is that something that you would agree with or disagree with?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Like, you have no way of finding out where your roots were, even with what we have today. You have no way of finding out what your culture is. Is that something that you would agree with or disagree with?
Well, I would agree and disagree because you said you're 100% Chinese, yeah?
Well, I mean, that's hard. Malaysian Chinese, yeah, Chinese.
Chinese. So if I would do,
it's Chinese, yeah.
If I were to do an ancestry DNA, it would probably read 25% Nigerian, 15% Ghanaian, 20% Togo, 2% white. It would. I would come from all across the slave coast of West Africa.
Right, West Africa.
Then you would have to in even in one of those countries, you have. Like Nigeria may have like over 70 or 80 languages in just one country. So then you'd have to go with, okay, well, which one am I? And now, I mean, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then the difficulty. So you're right, but then
that's what I'm talking about is that, I mean, the aspect of interracial, kids as well. That's also something that most people struggle with, and that's also something that people will put an effort to investigate on their own. And if they felt like it was important to them to recover aspects of their culture, feeling the need that they want to do that, they would have the ability to do that. I'm not saying it would be easy, but you do have the option of doing that. Like, I'm Chinese, but I'm also Malaysian. Now, there's also, it used to be a Commonwealth country, so I also speak English as a result of that. But I also can understand that that's something that you can go out and investigate. And, like, although it may not necessarily be easy because African Americans have been here for over 400 years, it's possible. It's something that you can do if you wanted to investigate it further. It's something that people would be able to do. Some people may be able to do it easier than others, and I'm not going to deny that. But you could do that if you wanted to. You could get in touch with your culture if you decided that it was something that you wanted to recover. Like, you were able to tell me, there were parts of West Africa that you were from. And I'm not saying that people necessarily would like say, okay, well, I'm not from here and I can't identify from here. I understand that because of where we've been, the nature of colonialization and people migrating is the same thing. Even with Asians, with the diasporas, people who can't really like speak the language. I'll be honest, like I can't speak the mother tongue of my home village. I can't. I can speak Mandarin, but I can't communicate with my grandmother. I'll actually say that. I said that in another video. She can't say my first name properly. She gives me a nickname because she can't say my name.
Okay.
So it's an example of that where it's like if I don't know where like my hometown is. I know the dialect. I know enough. I know I can identify with a little bit of culture that was mine in my past. But I don't know very much about that village. I mean, I do speak Mandarin, but see now, like just like Africa or whatever, it's more specific. I mean, we have provinces. I don't know anything about the Cantonese province, the village that I came through, but I could go find out. And some people have done that. I'm not saying that everybody needs to, but you could do that if you wanted to. You could tie yourself back as far as culture is concerned.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
No. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was done with the thought.
Okay, let me do this, guys. Zach Hing has come over here. 406 people watching. You have some pretty big YouTubers who are in there. I told you I was going to introduce you to Anthony Brian Logan. So the bully himself, he's in the, and I believe Zach, you're a fan of it. You like his channel, right?
Yeah, very, very. I've been following him for a good many months, 6 to 8 months now.
He's a very bad person.
This is interesting, and thank you for the shout out.
Don't watch that guy. He's a bad person. But let me do this. I see my brother Phil from the Advice Show. Let me thank him. He had me on his platform last night. We had a hell of a show. And actually Sister Erica. So guys, after this show, directly we're going to go on over to the Sunday Rumble. It's going to be cracking. We got some big names already on deck. Nyla, Cynthia G, Afro Synergy.
I'm excited for that. That's going to be interesting to listen to. I'll just listen.
Yeah, it's gonna be really good. Let me go ahead and read off some of the super chats here. Big Game Orenthal James, get the hell out of here. Asians are known for cheating on tests. All right, $2. Anti-Gravity asks, can you ask him?
Oh no. I mean, some people do cheat on tests, but not all. I will say that.
Can you ask him what about the Asians not doing well in America, like the Samoans, Thai, Vietnamese, and Hmong, as opposed to the Chinese, Korean, and Japanese?
What do you mean?
That was a question someone asked.
Oh, like why they are not doing well?
Yeah. I mean, I guess let me read it again. Can you ask him what about the Asians not doing well in America, like Samoans, Thai, Vietnamese, and Hmong, as opposed to basically why are the Chinese, Korean, and Japanese doing well, but Samoans, Thai, Vietnamese, and Hmong are not?
I mean, we'd have to look at what choices people are making in their culture and education, all the things that we're talking about, not specific to racial, demographics, but like what it is that's in their communities and what it is that they're being taught. I mean, when we say doing well, what does that mean? Does that mean like they're not able to get jobs because there's discrimination happening in there, or because they're not being able to go to school? I mean, what is the definition of doing well? Are we still talking about education and jobs? Because I can say that it's not all. I mean, there are a lot of Thai, Cambodian, Lao people that I know that are going to school. Now, I know speaking from personal anecdotes does not refute that, but I'm just saying that it's not all,
Okay.
There's also a higher demographic of Chinese Americans and Japanese Americans than there are for those other races as well. So, I mean, take into account the ratio as well of how many people there are. I mean, Japanese, yeah, like I was going to say, Japanese people are a small percentage. I was talking about Chinese people primarily.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that super chat of $5 anti-gravity. Let me also talk about Big Game Lorenzo. Oh no, he already read that. Erica Williams, I follow his channel, so you have a subscriber. She's on a pretty good side YouTuber. I agree with 80% of what he is saying, but other stuff is number one. I think it's regional. I have Korean and Thai male in-laws, life by design. Thank you, Erica. Smokehouse, I think the values are definitely different with most Asians versus other races. Our society shows it. Thank you so much. Cyber Z, my family told me every man should read The Prince, The Art of War, and 40 Laws of Power. Thank you. I think it's 40 or 48. I'm not sure.
It's 48.
Yeah. CACA,
Dumb.
they let you have a Chinatown. They weren't sabotaged or burned down like black business districts were. Shout out to CACA. The advice show no Chinatown in America was burned down to the ground. Chinese are benefactors of the model minority myth given to them by white supremacists. Chinese have benefited from affirmative action and the immigration bill.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but okay.
Okay, we can talk about that. Stop the hate and get the likes. So thank you, Junk Pie Video. Takia Jet, thanks, O'Shea. Erica, Black Wall Street was in the 1920s but burned. Many black business owners have been assaulted over the years. The current mortgage discrimination is prime example. Lack of business loans. Thank you, Sister Erica. Vauban Schwarzald, read about the Chinese massacre of 1871. Okay, basically skills, higher pair job plus investments equals moving on in America. Each person must get income and ownership up. In Voltron 512, I give your Gress credit for putting himself out there and being honest about a sensitive topic. No, and he's been very nice too. Like he's a really nice guy, and we should be able to have these discussions without people getting upset. But let me ask you this, Zach. I will agree with you on like I said, I like your channel. I will agree with you on a lot of stuff that we do have in America with any minorities, people who are not taking advantage of the opportunities that the United States has, including blacks.
Mm-hmm.
Is it your opinion that a lot of minorities who are not doing well are just not doing well because of their own efforts or lack of thereof?
I would say that that's a big part of it, yeah.
Okay. Do you think that a lot of people, particularly on the left, the minority left, are blaming other people for their own problems?
I would have to look at specific instances and where and which. And that's the thing, I don't think that it's a cut and dry like minorities are blaming these minorities and those minorities. It would have to be specific to the individual. If you asked somebody who is Cambodian or Hawaiian that question, they would give you a different answer, which is why I don't really have an answer for that as far as like who is to blame. And that's one thing that I've talked about is kind of like, okay, well, this is what you're confronted with. These are your choices, and this is what you have. Make the best of them and work. At the end of the day, it's like, Japanese people could blame people being a small percentage of what they are, yet being successful. So I can't imagine why they would complain. But, blaming some of the history in the United States for a lot of the prejudice and a lot of the discrimination that they also endured. That being said, it may be very different for another demographic of Asian people. I am not familiar with the Vietnamese diaspora to the United States, but I can imagine that there was a lot of discrimination with a lot of, the push for the Vietnam War and everything. I can say that specifically for people that have happened, not just in previous generations that are tied to my family, but also currently. It depends on who you ask. And, we're not, that's the thing is I don't like to play identity politics. It's not one group of people, so this is the sole reason for the disadvantages or anything. It's specific to the individual. A lot of times with the progressive left is that they put us into communities like the Asian community, the Black community, and maybe the different demographics, and this is the reason. These are the problems. When in reality, one person, even if you're Chinese, or another person, if you're Cambodian, your experiences are not going to be unique. I mean, they're going to be unique, but they're not going to be the same as other people who claim membership to that group of people. That's what I'm talking about. And it's like, it's interesting, when you talk to a Chinese American like myself, who comes from a different part of the United States, his experiences are very different from people who also experience the same problems in more metropolitan areas or cosmopolitan cities. Even when it comes down to location, it comes down to where you're at, to what kind of opportunities are afforded you in that, in that area and what aren't.
Let me ask you this, from your own perspective, the Chinese people who come over that are immigrants, when they look at the opportunities in America coming from China, what is it that they see that maybe, not to say that you're saying people don't see it, but maybe that people who are from the country, regardless of weight, white, black, or whatever, what are Chinese new immigrants when they come to America? What do they see in their drive that other people don't see?
Like opportunities from, you're talking about China specifically?
Yeah, the Chinese community, like as far as when Chinese immigrants that that come here,
From what I know,
Programs.
from what I can speak on, education. A lot of them will come here for schools, and believe it or not, some of them may stay here, or some of them may actually go home. A lot of them, who want to have jobs here and do that will actually try to ensure employment after that, simply because, interestingly enough, from China, it's not just like the opportunities, but I feel like there's a specific emphasis on like, well, go to an American school, go to these universities because they are worldly regarded, and this is the standard that you should meet. A lot of people overseas will say, go to America, and the biggest thing that I can speak on is education.
Mhm.
Now, after that, it's up to you. You want to stay there, great. You want to come back home and work. I find that people my age have experienced both. Some of them who immigrate here from China to come to school will may go to school here, or they may end up going home and working for their parents or whatever kind of organization will hire them.
When the Chinese are coming, I mean, like when you were coming up,
Hmm.
what was your childhood like as far as your parents talking about your education, things you should be focused on? What was your parents pushing? What they're in direction were your parents pushing you in?
Um, I mean, to value education, I actually think that I got the whole like pressure of doing well in school from my peers and not so much from my parents. My parents obviously wanted me to excel and things, but they taught me to, ultimately have values, be passionate about what you do, and make sure that you strive for excellence. But there wasn't like an explicit standard where it was like you had to go to a good school, you had to go to do this, you had to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. Thankfully, I didn't have the what you would think of as the typical Asian parenting experience as other Chinese people. Um, so I had more of the element of choice. Well, I guess everybody has a choice, but I was not as pressured to go into something that I didn't want to do as much as, say, some of my colleagues or my peers had to go through. So that's my experience, upbringing, and like I said, it was different. When I was going to school in Malaysia, it was, obviously a strong emphasis on education. Even the way education was administered was highly disciplined, repetitive. It kind of, you're good at certain fields, you excel in certain things because there's just so much emphasis on that. And then when I came to America and I went to public school for a while, it was different things. It was more of a focus on the social aspect and everything. And when I went back to Shanghai, it was also again an emphasis on education. But then when I came here, I just decided to do what I wanted to do, and I decided to pursue my own passions, at least at the time. So yeah, they taught me values, and they taught me to make choices, but I wasn't under really any kind of specific pressure to go into something I didn't want to go into.
How was living in Shanghai in comparisons to like living in the Bay Area?
Ooh, well, for one thing, Shanghai is not cheap either. Like Hong Kong, pretty it's pretty expensive. But here's the thing. I mean, Shanghai is developing at such a vast rate that when I lived there, when I first moved there in 2007 to when I left in 2012, radically different. I lived in an expat community, so you could say that I lived in a bubble. I'll be honest. It probably wasn't the real China that most people would think of. I lived in an expat community, which just means like a bunch of foreigners live in like gated communities. And, I was very blessed and fortunate that that's, where I grew up. And you could even get by without speaking much Mandarin. Again, Shanghai is known for its size. It's, 28 million people in one city, and it's very large. Obviously, it's a little bit more polluted than here, but I wouldn't say it's radically different from any other big city that you go to in the United States or otherwise. But I would say that because I went to an American school system, it wasn't radically different than the San Francisco Bay. You could say that there was just a lot of different people of different ethnic backgrounds, partially due to the expat community. But it was just it was nice because I was in an American community, so it didn't really feel like I was living in China, so to speak. I mean, we could travel around, but I went to an international school. I was fortunate that all my classes were in English. They taught AP and IB classes. It's not too different from how it is here, except for maybe the politics or the country or your currency. But so, coming to America, it wasn't like a big cultural shock or shift because a lot of those ideas and practices were already being exercised overseas. And I don't know if you share this same view, O'Shea, if you don't mind me asking me, like, It may be very different in Poland. What part of Poland are you in Warsaw?
No, I'm in a
No,
city called Lublin.
Lublin. Lublin. Again, I don't know much about Poland, but I would argue that in a lot of these international cities like Tokyo, Hong Kong, perhaps even cities like the UK. I mean, like London in the UK and Madrid. Like when I visited Madrid, there was just like they all had their own cultures that were specific to those cities.
Yes.
But as far as people goes, you found all types of people in those cities.
Right.
And I feel like what defines a city and like what you would be like the biggest takeaway were the people. So it was like living in Shanghai wasn't radically different. Going to the UK and going to London wasn't radically different either. And I would argue that if you went to Hong Kong, which I've also been to, it's also the same. It's just all different types of people, but it's a big city, so lots of it's a diverse crowd of people.
No, I can agree with that because I just came back from like Johannesburg, so I'm echoing for some reason. Let me see.
Oh, no. Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting. I've never been to Poland. I can't speak on it. But I mean, if you're enjoying it, I do think that that's cool. I've never been to that part of Europe at all, and I can't really speak much on it because
you're not missing anything, dude.
What?
You're not missing anything. Unless you like white girls, then this is the place for you. Definitely. If you like white girls, then you'll have a good time here, for sure.
Okay, well that's good to know.
Yeah. So let me do this. We have 430 people watching, guys. Let me ask you this: how many people have subscribed to Zach? Not that he needs the subscribers because he's subscriber rich, but
thank you guys, I appreciate you listening.
Yeah, we have like over 400 people watching right now.
That's amazing. Thank you for watching, everybody. I know it's not everybody would want to have me here, but the fact that I get to talk to the man, the real MVP here, O'Shea, is the important thing. The fact that we can have a dialogue on it.
And Anthony Brian Logan said that he just subbed to you just now. So
Anthony Brian Logan, it's an honor. Thank you so much. I like your videos a lot, and I appreciate you also taking the time out of your busy day to watch my videos. I know you have a lot going. And that guy, I mean, I don't know how you guys do it. You guys upload multiple times a day. Like, I put out a video every day, and I do my best to do that. But, I mean, you're like putting on 3-hour shows 3 times a day.
Yeah.
And doing your own thing and going to med school.
Well, I've been doing that a lot in this last 3 or 4 weeks that I've had off, but obviously that's going to cut back down when I go back to school. But yeah, it's hard work, man. YouTube, and you're finding out. Let's talk about that real quick because you went from 0 subscribers to, and I'm going to read the chats out here, 0 subscribers to a lot of subscribers. In 6 weeks. How has YouTube kind of changed things for you from like 2 months ago to where you are now?
I mean, for one thing, I definitely go to sleep at night wondering what I'm going to talk about the next day. That's one thing. It definitely has affected my personal life and professional life. Not everybody's going to agree with what I'm talking about. Not everybody's going to want to talk about what I'm talking about. And the one thing that I can say honestly is that it's forced me to be able to not only vocalize my thoughts, because now I'm addressing people on the internet, to defend them, and to, to also understand that, like, I think the one thing that you're not completely aware of until you start doing this on YouTube is understanding that people are just not going to like you for whatever reason. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. Like, aside from whatever content you're making, whether it may be political commentary or social commentary or just even having an opinion, I've found that I've had to part ways with certain people, not through any real choice of my own, reluctantly, but because of the platform, because of what I'm talking about. So how it's affected my life, I guess in just the short 6 weeks that I've been taking it more seriously, it's forced me to really reevaluate and understand that this is exactly what you're getting yourself into. And here's the thing, like with Chinese people, at least for me, to go back to it a little bit, we're not taught to speak up. We're called the silent minority for a reason. And it's not something that I witness a lot. So for me, it's a little bit scary because it's also just like, I don't know any other people, at least that are very similar to me, that are also doing this. I get my support from a lot of the people that are on the channel that say a lot of nice things and encourage me to continue talking about these things. That's essentially it. I mean, it's just adjusting to the grind and the people. So
Okay, let me do this, and I won't hold you too much longer, guys. Make sure that you subscribe to Zach Hing's YouTube channel. We're posting a link. Oh wow, okay, so you got like 23 subscribers in like 2 minutes. That was cool.
thank you
And
guys for
yeah,
subscribing and listening.
thank you guys so much for doing that. Let me read some things here. Brother Lance Brown, thank you so much. How do we build black culture? We need a new starting point, brother. Yes, we do. Varbon Schwajald, start with yourself in the household. Thank you, brother. That's absolutely true. My brother Moses Jenkins wants to know, why were or are martial arts disciplines important? Are you there?
Uh-oh, I lost you there. What's
Yeah,
up?
yeah. He wants to know, why are martial arts disciplines important? Why were, like, in Chinese culture?
Dude, honestly, I did not value martial arts growing up. I mean, I don't know any martial arts whatsoever. I think maybe because it teaches you the aspect of progressive discipline and that it gets harder every time you do it. So you're forced to adapt and learn a new skill. I think that that's probably beneficial for a lot of people, regardless of what the discipline is. But truthfully, I don't know anything. I don't know any martial arts. I'm a little bit. I know I'm not really perpetuating my stereotype very well here, but I don't know any martial arts. I can see why it would be important to teach you things like honor and values and that. And hey, I'm all for that 100%. But I don't know much about it because I was never taught it. So I think I took one Taekwondo class ever and did so badly that it was like the biggest curse that I could have had, and I just never went back. So. But sorry, I don't know if I answered that question. Can you say that one more time? Let's see here.
I think it's, let me do this. That was a pretty good answer to that. Let me ask you this. So East, let me shout out to Antoine Wade. He was living in Malaysia for some time. He's back now in the States. People, no matter what race, won't get that far wasting their breath on somebody else. They need to check themselves. Black men especially. Hallelujah, brother. You are preaching right there. I believe in that. Deuce Ex Machina. East Asians are considered honorary whites. That's why white men, even the supremacists, don't consider dating Asian women as race mixing. What's Zach's view on that?
They don't consider that race mixing. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it is. You are interracial marriage. I don't know where that's coming from. That's not really something that I have a positive or negative outlook on. I think people can marry who they want to marry, and I think when it comes to the aspect of using, if we're talking about dating here, and it just so happens to be racially charged, I think that's the wrong reasons to get into a relationship. First of all, it should be about other things that I won't go into. This is not a dating show. But if that just so happens to be the case where a white person marries an Asian person, male or female, and vice versa, I think that it would have a lot of different effects. Now, also, here's the thing. I mean, like, there's the whole like white man marrying Asian women, and then like Asian man marrying white women, which is not as common. And it's hard to say. Like, it's hard to say like what necessarily. I mean, I think a lot of people sometimes would say it's because it's not something that they're used to, not something that they're familiar with, which kind of relates to the whole exotification of race. But when I think about it, it's like I don't really have an opinion on that as long as you're dating or getting married for the right reasons. Not just because you've never had Asian or white. At least that's my outlook on it. I don't think it's a problem, but I also think it is a race thing. I don't think it's like not a race thing. It's like, okay, well, you're a different race. So yes, it is interracial dating. I don't know why you would see it as such.
Okay. And let's do that. And so we have my brother Larry Wilson 81. We're gonna definitely do a show on his ideology. Larry, I have not forgot you. Just make sure you email me again, because you're definitely in my 80 collaborations that I have at the end of the year. Great show as always, O'Shea and Zach. Great commentary. And Zach, I want to thank you, man, for coming by again. Like, even with my show yesterday with
Yeah.
Dean Cole, it took me like 1 month to finally get up with him, and bro, it took us a few weekends tell people like YouTube is actually work, right? Tell people like how long it actually took us, me and you, to do this show.
About 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, like O'Shea hit me up several weeks ago and was really friendly. I mean, to O'Shea's audience too, I want to be one of those guests. Talk about your audience. You have a very dedicated, loyal, and great group of people that you are talking to. And I know that there's a lot of things that they may not agree with me on or your guests, but the fact that you keep this going is wonderful. Also, to remark on the YouTube work, yeah, it's a lot of work. What he's doing, so be sure to definitely keep supporting O'Shea and whoever guests he brings on. He's a guy of good values and good taste. I would like to think so. So definitely keep that up. And it is a lot of work. He's running 3-hour shows every day. You're doing a great job, and like I tune in whenever I can. Sometimes I'll be listening, like when I'm doing something else. It's nice because it feels very podcast like. So I can definitely just like tune out. I'll be there, but I'll just be like listening. But yeah, thank you. YouTube's a lot of work, and it took a while to set this up, and I'm glad we finally got to talk. And I hope you bring me back for other aspects as well. I mean, it doesn't necessarily, I hope it doesn't end here with just, race or culture, but we can talk about other things, perhaps,
like masculinity, toxic masculinity. We talked about that a little bit earlier.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, masculinity, certainly something that my demographic probably could do a little bit better on. We could improve on that. I won't lie. And you know what? It's just, I think what I like about you, O'Shea, is that you're real and you're sincere. And I'll say that on this live chat. It's like, this guy will speak his mind no matter what. And that's great. Like, there's just not many people that have that sort of outlook, and will happily bring people who disagree with him and other people as well. So yeah. But yeah, that's all I really have to say. Thank you so much. I mean, we talked for a good hour, and I hope you have me back. And yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, we're gonna definitely have you back. And he called, guys. I had a O'Shea after dark stream last night where I was kind of graphic, and Zach was in there a lot. And that was right after, I don't know if the buy show was there, but right after I did that show, that clean show on the buy show, I went live last night real late, and I was talking a lot of shit. I don't know if you guys remember that last night, and Zach was in that show, and I was kind of graphic, but he was enjoying it. Yeah, he went. Yeah, T Kelly said, "Oh my God, he was there." Yeah, that was him. So he was enjoying it, man. And so in Phil's audience, they was like, "Did I come over here to listen to this?" And they stayed. So
it's not my place to comment in that. This is stuff that I have no idea about. So I mean, what's the harm in just listening for a second, be like, okay, I've never heard this perspective at all, but okay, you know what? I'll just listen. That's what I like. It's like, this is news to me. I don't get to hear this stuff anywhere else, and it's just like, okay, it's great.
Yeah, that's the good thing about Black YouTube. Black YouTube is fun, man. It's fun. You know what I mean? Even Anthony Brian Logan, whose channel is very diverse. He even says, man, when I come on your channel, I get to be a little bit more of myself. So, and Anthony Brian Logan, he will be on the show tonight. Thank you, brother Timothy Blewett. So listen, guys, Zach, we'll definitely do another topic, man. I really thank you. I'm a big fan of your channel. I was like, when you went live for your first time, I was like, bro, I gotta be the first person to super chat. Gotta be the first person.
Did. You beat everybody.
First.
Yeah, you did it. You did it 100%. Hey, I just have one last question. I know we're wrapping things up here, but do you invite other people regularly that are, I guess, non-Black, and talk about, like, because I've watched a lot of your videos, but I feel like this is interesting because I'm not Black and I can't speak on Black people's experiences, So, do you talk to other people as well as part of Black YouTube and bring other people of different races on, or is it primarily just Black people?
I think primarily it's just Black people. You're probably the second non-Black guest I've ever had, ever.
Wow.
Yeah. Whoa, and the other one is like a white guy that was married to a Black, John Paul. We did a show.
Uh-huh.
Oh no, Junk Pile video. Yeah, you're Junk Pile video. You're not really white though. I mean, so yeah. I mean, yeah. So really, it's been like, yeah. But I typically don't really not that I'm against it, but I really don't. I mean, I'm not against it, but
sure. I mean, there's a place for everything. If this is a place that is specifically for Black YouTube, all for you. Like definitely, I'm honored that you brought me on. I know I'm not the token guest, but
wait, that's right. The Polish white guy, Darius. Okay, so I've had Three. You're the fourth non-black. So John Paul, the guy in Poland,
Mm-hmm.
you, and Junk Pile Video. So I've had four non-black. Aaron Clary. There you go. Five. See, it's so many. It's not that many of them. Yeah. So I've had like five non-black guests out of like about like 150.
Sure. Well, it's a
You're
real
the
honor.
first Asian guy though. That makes you feel any better. You are the first Asian guy. For
First
sure.
Asian guy. Oh man, what other Asians are out there like on YouTube that you can? I would love to see you just talk to. I mean, I know it doesn't really matter. People are people. Interesting people are interesting people. But like, I mean, like, I don't know. I just want to see like real like crazy talks. I mean, like, there's not even a lot of like Asian like manospheric types either. You know, that would be so interesting because it's like, hey, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, we could use a dose of that in our community for sure. I mean, we have a lot of similar issues. It's just an interesting thing to think about, and definitely something, something that I would advocate for 100%.
There's a Japanese guy who made a pretty controversial video about the black community. I think, yeah, a random Yoko. I mean, I'm not against any of these, doing collaborations with any of those guys. Let me check them out.
Yeah, I know you're not. It's just it would be fascinating just to see how that would play out. I mean, like I know we don't make it about race, but I mean, like that the questions will come up, and that's what I'm interested in is the background and all that.
Yeah.
Not because they're on here because of race, but because of their perspective.
Right.
I'm old because I only just opened up the window, so I wasn't really reading a lot of the comments. But yeah, you have a great crowd. You have really really cool supporters. Like these are
they're crazy. Awesome. Well, last question: does he have any interest in international business networking?
Only if I knew what that meant. What does that even mean?
Yeah, Moses, he asks very interesting questions. So, can you be more specific, Moses, as to what you mean by that? I mean, international business networking. I mean, I'm just waiting for him to and thank you for the support. So let me see here.
Nobita. I've heard of that guy.
How did you like doing your first live show, man? Was it cool? Like,
it was a lot of fun. Hey, man, I'm gonna do more of those. I'll probably schedule them in advance, like you do, and I might even ask you for some advice on how to, moderate it properly. I mean, it was out of hand because it was unstructured. It was impromptu. Like, I think things to improve on is the next live streams. Number one, announce it ahead of time, and number two, actually have a little bit of an agenda to go through. So it's not like I'm talking. I know that the spontaneity of it is cool because there's more personality in it, but I do want people to get value out of it. I don't want them to just be like, oh, watch me because I'm entertaining or whatever. I don't think I'm that entertaining personally, but like if I came into it with talking points, like, okay, I'm going to talk about this, let me hear your feedback. And then we'll talk about like, anything from politics to race to movies that are out, then that's different because there's an agenda. So that's all I would say. But you have like moderators. I think getting more moderators to help keep things somewhat civil and structured would also be helpful. Because and slow chat. I mean, I didn't turn on slow chat. I didn't know how to do it, but I'm going to do that.
How many people did you get up to last night?
About 120, 150, something like that. That's I mean, I think people were in and out constantly, and it was impromptu. A lot of people were like, "Oh man, I missed it," and again, something to improve on. I'll let people know ahead of time so we don't have to. I don't do that again. Not too surprising. Yeah, and have people on the show too. Like I want to get into like you're doing what you're doing is interesting because there's just a wealth of ideas that get talked about, not just one idea in one video. It's like touched on like 20 different things. So.
Yeah, that happens as you kind of get to, at least for my shows, the people that I collaborate with, there's so many that I know like certain people fit in certain topics. So when you get into your collaborations and stuff and you're networking with other YouTubers, which you won't have a hard time doing because you have 28,000 subs. But a lot of times, man, some of the best people that give me shows, man, have been people that had like 100 subs or 200 subs or it's amazing what you can get, from people that are just like even your subs
Absolutely. I've reached out to a few, and I hope to, AM1, that guy was on your show 2 days ago. I mean, he's an Oakland guy too. I definitely want to see if we can talk. I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah, I am surprised by the amount of support because, like, honestly, I don't expect people to. I don't really. I mean, this is probably the curse of the mindset that Asians have is like, you're not ever good enough. You're not ever meeting the expectation, whatever that means. It's not even defined. But like, yeah, I'm blown away by the support. I mean, 28,000 people either like or don't like what I have to say, and that to me is enough of a reason to keep going. So, yeah, dude. But I know you got another show, and again, I have to thank your viewers so much for the opportunity, and thank you as well. Even though we disagree, that's okay. The whole point is to be able to talk about these things, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. This was a blast.
Let me shout out to Terry Randolph. O'Shea looking for a plug, trying to ship phones to Uganda. Last two questions. Thanks. Keep it techie. Are you in the tech field? I think you're not in the tech field.
Oh yeah, I saw that. No, I'm not. Healthcare, not tech.
Healthcare. And then last question, like I guess like import export. I was just a question like, do you do like, are you into that kind of business? I know a lot of Chinese people do import export. Do you do that?
I mean, sure, I'm open to it. I would have to know what it is. I'm not really closed off to anything, but yeah, if I know more of the specifics, why not? I'm open to seeing what it's about and then making a decision from there. But for now, yeah, we'll see.
All right. Well, again, Zach, thanks for coming on to the show, and I'll be immediately going into the Sunday Rumble. Cynthia G is going to be on tonight. Afro Synergy is going to be on tonight. I think Anthony Bryan Logan's going to be on tonight. We have a hell of a panel. So I think LAR, Super Slides the lead off. Amiri Brown. It's going to be crazy tonight. Eating Cole. So it's going to be crazy. It's probably going to be the best one.
I'm looking forward to it. Hey, what time is it at? I'll tune in. I'll be in the.
It's going to start in like 15 minutes on my other channel.
Oh, okay, got it. Then what I'll do is I will tune into that happily, and I'm interested. I'm really excited for it. Yeah, it's gonna be good. Right. Cynthia G.
You've heard of her before, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a lot. So even he knows Cynthia G. Oh boy. Okay, big game. I'll get to you, bro. I'll make sure we unhide you. And again, thanks so much. The show is happening. She just emailed me. Where's the link? So she's ready to go. So thanks again, Zach, and I'll see you pretty soon. And the rest of you people over there. Thanks again, Zach.
Thanks, O'Shea. Talk to you soon.